think AI is phenomenal. I think it's not something to be afraid of, but it's something to embrace. And it has so many different values and uses. And it really depends on how you use it. What AI lacks is humanity. And I think that if you solely rely on AI, that doesn't work. When you use AI to augment what you do, and you use it as a tool, not as a cure-all.
Robert Davidman, thank you so much for coming on the Explain Yourself podcast. You have a super interesting background from being hired by Mark Cuban, really growing that company with him. I'm really interested in how he found you, co-founder of Fearless, partner in Fearless. You have 10 offices all over, 1,200 employees. And that's just scratching the surface. So can you tell us a little bit more about you? I know you've been an entrepreneur your whole life. You understand sales and tech. I'm so super excited to talk to you. Yeah, tell me a little bit about you and what you're focused on now and your background of how you started to, I guess, be so successful.
Well, thank you, Dana. It's tell you about myself. It's always hard to talk about myself, but I am the product of an entrepreneur. My father was an entrepreneur. He was a salesman. And growing up, he instilled a lot of business ethics in me to always reach for the things that I wanted and the things that I wanted to do and to not let things get in my way. And if something did get in my way, just figure out a way around it. And that's what I've done my whole career. I have found the things and the path that I wanted to take, and I saw where I wanted to go, and I paved my way. Sometimes that meant going in a straight line, and other times that meant going zigzag. That's really how I see my life as it's a series of different experiences and different things, whether it's in business or personal.
I think what's really interesting about you is you have found a way to add value to any company, whether or not you contributed later or not. Can you tell me about when COVID hit and you started to focus on what was the company that you were growing again? Like
Three.
online casinos online. Would you say a lot of your business success came from timing? Or do you think that it's more about like perseverance? Tell me about your COVID experience.
So I would love to say that I knew that this was going to be a really interesting opportunity. I would start by saying this. I would say that I would love to say that I knew that COVID was going to come and that people were going to be stuck at home and that I had a great opportunity and let's take advantage of it. But that wasn't really the case. I actually, back in 2019, with a partner, we wanted to get into the online sports betting and casino business. So starting in 2019, we were working on launching a product and service in Canada. And fortunately or unfortunately, the launch date was April 9th, 2020. And we're launching a sports book and all sports were stopping. Everything stops. But we also had an online casino. So we had the benefit of launching a new product literally as everybody was being locked down. And part of our product offering outside of the sports betting was something that you could do at home, play on a casino and spend time because you weren't doing anything else. You weren't working, you weren't this, you weren't that, but you can play a slot machine or play blackjack. And we just got lucky, but we were at the right place at the right time with the right product. And that was really the start of something very interesting for us.
So I want to talk about how Mark Cuban found you and your process of growth between growing that company within him. Can you tell me about how he discovered you and then that process?
Back in 1994, I had a job selling sponsorships for then called the Florida Marlins, now the Miami Marlins, for their radio broadcast. And in 1994, baseball decided to go on strike and there was nothing happening. There was no World Series that year. And yet I had a job and my job was to sell sponsorships of the team and of the radio broadcast, which there were none. So I needed to figure out how I was going to keep my worth at the radio station that I had a job and show some value. And at the time was the early days of the World Wide Web. And I taught myself HTML and I built one of the first radio station websites in the country at the time for the radio station. And fast forward, we started making some news. The radio industry publications were talking about it. And about a year in, sometime in 1995, I get a phone call. And that phone call was from Mark Cuban. And he said, I would like to broadcast your station on the internet. And I'm like, we're on the internet. And he now said, no, I actually want to put the signal on the internet. I would really like that to be something that people will hear. And what was interesting about that was nobody had been doing that before, never been done. And that was the advent of the streaming era. And Mark said, I want to do it. And I said, how much does it cost? Because that was going to be the big deal. And that was going to make or break it with the owners of the station. And he said, no, it's nothing. It's going to be free. I'm going to do it for you because you're the first. So that was the right price. And that's how we got started. 5 or 6 months in, Mark said, you should leave there and come work with me and help me build this. And he and his partner Todd and probably about 8 other people were in the company, and they hired me to run sales and marketing. And that's how my experience started with him. And it was very interesting. We had a roller coaster ride, and I had to do a lot of different things. I believed, first of all, I always believed that the best product or service was enough to succeed. But I learned that innovation isn't just about the product, it's about how you tell the story. And that key moment in my time during broadcast.com, that's where that key moment happened. We were pioneering the concept of streaming radio and TV on the internet, something no one else was doing. And it made me realize that people don't just buy products. They buy into the stories, the experiences, and the excitement of being part of something new. And really, the secret that I got out of that was that storytelling and packaging your offering are as crucial as the offering itself. That innovation isn't only about technology, right? It's about making people understand and want to be part of what you're doing.
You took that company from, you said, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were able to get to 5 million within 4 years once you started working with Mark Cuban. Is that right? And then that led to billions from there, right?
So when we first started, it was very interesting, right? The biggest challenge was trying to convince clients to do something different. So, first of all, at broadcast.com, we had to sell the idea that the internet was a legitimate platform, right? For anything, let alone the fact that you would be able to actually listen to the radio or watch TV on the internet. Back then, most people had a modem and they dialed in. And when you listened to audio on the internet, it sounded like two tin cans and a string. And a lot of people weren't ready to accept it. So I had to really struggle in the early days. I would go to meeting after meeting and I pushed the boundaries by showing clients that streaming events live on the internet could bring unprecedented engagement and we can track it because the data was there. And one of the things that I helped pioneer was the introduction of what we call today pre-roll advertising. What's interesting about that is I was able to go to clients and say, how would you like it if I could tell you that every time somebody turned on the radio, the first thing they would hear is an advertisement from you before they were allowed to watch or listen to the content. And it was something that people didn't even know they needed until they tried it. And they're like, oh, wow. And now it's ubiquitous. You don't turn on a video these days without getting a 15 or 30-second ad. And if you want to watch the content, unless you're buying it, right? If you're watching it for free, you got to watch an ad. And that's something that we pioneered. And what's interesting was the early days when we did this. It was really trying to convince people. People were saying the ones that were advertising online, all they wanted to do was banner ads. And they didn't understand how they could take an audio or video ad and put it online. So they didn't want to spend the money. And they were hesitant. But after we streamed a live event once and we took an advertiser's ad and we targeted it to a very specific audience through that, and they saw the engagement, they saw the power, right? And that experience taught me that stepping into the unknown and being the first mover often leads to the biggest rewards. So, how do they do this? So, how do we scale to 5 million? Right? It was a journey that took about 4 years, and here's how it unfolded, right? So, the first step really was aligning on a vision with the right partners. And Mark Cuban and Todd Wagner, they had that. They really had the vision and they explained their vision and they were very clear about how they were going to do that. And we all bought into that. So we believed that the internet could be a powerful platform for media, even when everybody else said no. And then it was about building relationships. So we started out, Mark started, reached out to me at a radio station. And then when I came on board, I started reaching out to radio stations and sports broadcasters and content creators. And we had to explain how streaming online could expand their audience and increase engagement and ultimately increase revenues for them. And then the innovative advertising. So the pre roll ads, that was a major leap in digital advertising and convincing allocate advertisers to allocate a budget to what I would call an internet experiment was challenging, but we knew it could work, right? We demonstrated results by measuring engagement metrics and showing businesses that they were getting real value. So we can show them how many people were listening, how many people were watching, how long did they watch, and then seeing the interaction with emails and clicks and other things and sales on their end. So the results really spoke for themselves. And then over time, that allowed us to sign bigger deals with advertisers, right? But it took persistence. We had to iterate a lot, right? And there was a lot of education. But eventually we hit the 5 million mark. And once we hit the 5 million mark, then the company had gone public. And then after the company went public in 1999, Yahoo stepped in and purchased the business for $5.7 billion. That was a very big milestone. Why? Mark ended up buying a basketball team and he bought the Dallas Mavericks for $250 million. And everybody thought he was crazy. Why? Because it was way more money than anybody thought the team was worth. But he said it was well worth it. And he proved it because he recently sold his majority stake in the team and don't know the exact number, but I know it was for billions. And the takeaway that I got from all of that is that scaling a business isn't just about having a great product. It's about executing effectively. It's about being patient. It's about convincing others to share your vision, right? And a really interesting thing that I learned from both Mark and Todd was that there's a lot of really great ideas out there, but there's not a lot of really great people that can execute.
Yeah, I think you're really right about that. That's so fascinating because a lot of the times you'll hear that if you have some sort of idea and you're starting from ground zero to get someone to understand it in order to buy it, you're just like, most of the time, it's best to just bypass that. But you've done it multiple, you've done it multiple times. So I'm picturing, I don't know if this is the case, but I'm picturing you going to all of these companies with data and just focused on the percentage of the amount of people you think people will be able to see their ads and trying to run the numbers for them over and over again until someone's ready to just give you a chance because it could work, right? What do you think was like the tip in doing something like that? Because other than just perseverance, most of the time it's not going to work unless you're just really, you guys are smart guys. So you just knew that's where the attention was, right? So you figured I'll just go to someone else until someone really sees what we do. Is that right? Or did you like reassess how you would actually approach trying to get someone on board?
So I spent a lot of time educating. And what I found, it was quite interesting. There was actually, this is a very interesting story. So when I was at broadcast.com, one of my main jobs was going to big advertising agencies. And at the time, I was living in Dallas, Texas, and I had to fly to New York to Madison Avenue to meet with the big agencies and talk to them. And I went to a very large advertising agency and I was meeting with one of the lead digital advertising guys. And I said, we'd love for you to do some streaming with us and this and that. And he says, we don't have a lot of budget because the digital budget is much smaller than our traditional side of the business. And there's not a lot of money. So we really can't do that right now. We have to focus on banners and this and that. And I had met somebody within the agency that worked on the traditional side. And I told him about what we can do and how we can target advertising. And this is a very interesting story in the sense that he said they had a problem. So they represented a cereal called Raisin Bran Crunch. And Raisin Bran Crunch started running advertisements and they were running them on TV and they ran into a problem. Their ad depicted a milkman and the milkman was delivering milk and he was putting it on the doorstep of this house. And he was bending down to put it in on this doorstep. And the door opens and it's a woman and she's in a house dress and she's older and she has a raspy voice like she's been smoking for years. And she says, "Good morning, Johnny. Want to join me for breakfast?" And he looks over her shoulder and he sees the raisin bran crunch on the table and he said, "I'd love to, ma'am." And then the commercial ends with Raisin Bran Crunch. It's what's for breakfast. And all these seniors saw this commercial and were offended. And they started writing a letter campaign to Kellogg's saying, "We're boycotting. You're making fun of us, this, that, and the other." And they were mortified. The agency was like, "We didn't buy that demographic. We bought young people. How did older people see this?" And I said, if you used digital, you can target younger people and you won't waste on older people and they won't see it. My friend at the agency said, "Why don't you come and present this to the TV team?" So as a courtesy, I invited the digital guy that I also knew. And I said, "Come to the meeting." We get to the meeting and he did not know one person in the meeting from the traditional side of the business. And I said to myself, that's insane. If I was the client and I saw that my digital team didn't know the traditional team and they didn't speak to each other, there's no cohesion. What are you doing with my money? And in that conversation, I said what I said and I explained how we can target. And the head of the TV said, "Look, we really don't have that much money." And my digital guy started to smile and thought, "I told you." And he said, "All we have is $250,000 left in the kitty. What's that going to get you?" Literally, he almost fell back in his chair because his digital budget, I believe, was less than $100,000 in total. The 250,000 was leftover, discretionary, and they had no idea that it was sitting there. And I said, that's what I'm going to do. There's a hole. So what I did is I saw this fundamental flaw in how agencies operated. They were so siloed. That gave me the impetus to start my own integrated agency. And that's where we knew the left hand knew what the right hand was doing, right? I saw that there was value in providing both traditional and digital advertising services to clients in a way that was seamless and cohesive. And this became the foundation for what became the Fearless Agency. And we built a reputation for pushing boundaries and making sure that every part of the campaign worked together to create maximum impact. And literally, we were talking about this 2 months ago. We took things a step further by forming a joint venture called Fearless in partnership with a company called LS Digital, and Fear LS is focused on helping companies digitally transform their businesses. We address what we call digital friction. That's the challenges that prevent customers from having a smooth online experience. So by combining Fearless's integrated marketing strategies with LS Digital's expertise in digital transformation, we provide really powerful solutions for the clients that we have.
I love what you do because I completely agree that something like advertising is just too segmented. It feels like you're going to a bank and then you're transferred to one department and then they transfer you to another one. And so if you don't fully know where your advertisement's being spent, there's all this testing done. But then if it doesn't follow through with a whole cohesive plan, then there's a lot of money left on the table. And so you're probably missing out on a lot of optimizing potential as well, based on where your what your goal is for the quarter or for that particular company in general, right? Like you but you saw this a long time ago because you started before you were with PRLS, you were the co-founder of Fearless, which is doing something similar as a boutique company that you started, and you co-founded that company in what year? Fearless.
So in so basically in 1999, when Yahoo purchased broadcast.com, I started a media agency that originally was called Earthquake Media. And that we built, and that was primarily just media buying and planning. And that sort of where that was the gap filler that did the integrated media buying. So we did traditional media and digital media, and we worked with that. And in 2009, we saw a need to offer a bit more full service. People were looking for more creative and things. And that was something that I just didn't do. So I brought in some partners, really great guys with a wealth of experience working in some of the biggest agencies and biggest brands in the world. And we came together and we formed Fearless. And we formed Fearless out of a very interesting and unique happenstance is we were awarded a piece of business as a startup, and the business that we were given, they gave it to us, and like a few days after they gave it to us, they took it away. And they took it away because the campaign that we came up with was going to make them famous. And they realized it was going to work. And they were worried that if they got famous, it would cause damage because they were based in Colombia. And in Colombia, if they got famous, they were literally worried that they could get kidnapped or their families would get kidnapped, and they didn't want to get famous and they were afraid. And we said, we have to investigate fear and courage. And after doing a real deep dive on fear and courage, we said people and marketers and brands need to inject a bit of courage into their marketing. And in order to do that, you need to be fearless. And that's how we came up with the name.
Yeah, I like that. That's cool. I also know that a lot of these really big companies, the ones that kind of take a lot of market share and get very large, are spending the most during recessionary periods. So they have to have a lot of courage and fearlessness to continue, even when the results might take a little bit. So that's a cool name. I didn't know that. I didn't know that's where you came up with that. So they took away your first business. They took away the business they gave you, which I'm assuming are like previous clients or a list of clients that they had. And then you were starting from ground zero to get your first clients, or did you already have
No, no. So we had clients that we worked with
earthquake?
and things that we did, but that was the initial client that we were working on as fearless, offering creative and all of that. And we ultimately decided that this is how we were gonna march forward. And one thing that we recognize is that people see thousands and thousands of messages a day. Some of them are advertising, some of them are not. And getting people to remember something when they see thousands of messages a day is very difficult. And there comes basic marketing of reach and frequency. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to understand how can we make what we do memorable so that anything that we do for a client is something that people will remember, something people will want to go back to later, right? And sometimes it's an advertisement, sometimes it's entertainment, sometimes it's both. And that's really why we created what we created. And then when we created FearLS, what was interesting about it is the company that we were looking at to do the merger with is a company called LS Digital. And they are one of the premier organizations for digital business transformation. And they do all types of executions for digital business, everything from UX and UI to creative and data analytics. And that's all the stuff that we believe in. And when we came together, I said, hey, we're fearless. You're LS. Be fearless. And that's how we came up with the name. And it's quite just a little play on the words, but it works really well. And now we have, as I said before, we have 10 offices around the world, offices in Europe, in the Middle East, in Asia Pacific, and North America. And we have 1,200 people. And these 1,200 people are just, they're doing everything. We buy tremendous amounts of media around the world. We have a client roster of over 450 clients that we work with, of all different sizes, but pretty large businesses, large scale businesses. And we help them understand how they can scale their businesses from where they are today and get them 5, 10, 15 times to where they are.
Are you doing that for a lot of these really big companies? I would imagine that they're maybe you're in say like 2024, are there a lot of things that big companies are not doing that they should be that you're helping them? Not we don't have to get into the minutia necessarily, but do you see a lot of patterns that they're just like completely off the grid in certain areas?
Well, I think part of it is listening. Sometimes when you're so deep in it, it's hard to hear what people are actually telling you. And that's interesting when we survey customers and we listen to customers. Sometimes customers are telling you something and you don't want to hear it. So you don't hear it. And we help them hear what their customers are saying. What are the problems that they have? And then we help them solve for those problems. And that's really how we do this. So that could be something as simple as the color on your web page or the design of your mobile app or your mobile experience or the flow of how a customer finds you to what they see when they come to your page to where they navigate to. All of that plays a role. And it's what you say and how you say it, right? Because sometimes it's not just what you say, it's how you say it.
Yeah. I bet it would be interesting. There's no way to necessarily know this for sure, but I would bet that a lot of your smaller clients are actually a lot more optimized than the larger ones just because there's so much red tape involved and investors and like approvals that I would imagine keeps them a little bit behind with making changes. No? Did you find that?
In some cases, it can be, right? And in some cases, you have very large companies that you think are very large, but they're really just an amalgamation of very small companies.
Oh,
So
right.
when you look at something like Johnson and Johnson, it seems like such a big company, but it's really an amalgamation of lots of brands, and each brand has its own thing and its own directives and its own guidance, and they do what they need to do. And you can't just go in at the top and then go all the way down. You have to maneuver within all the different brands. That's for the likes of Unilever and Procter and Gamble. All of these kinds of companies, they're in one sense, they're very large, but in another sense, they're also very small companies. Sometimes they're startups within the big company.
Yeah, that's true. Where do you see your company? First of all, going back to what is new now in 2024, how do you think AI is going to change what you're doing? Are you using it now, or do you just think it's going to make you more effective? What are companies that you're working with, all your clients, what are they doing that's maybe not so great?
So first of all, the first part of your question, what about AI? So I think AI is phenomenal. I think it's not something to be afraid of, but it's something to embrace. And it has so many different values and uses. And it really depends on how you use it. So one of the things that we do is we do a lot of market research and a lot of other types of research with AI infused into it. So we can do research at scale because the AI allows us to do that. When you feed the models with data, the AI allows you to access that data much faster than it would be if I had to go through volumes of work on my own. What I also find interesting is where AI has come in such a short amount of time. So, although AI has been around, you're starting to see more rapid improvements and you're seeing the results of years and years of work on AI. So, AI is not new, but what we're seeing now is all the hard work that has been done for years. And that's what we're getting to see the results. And you're seeing that with ChatGPT. You're seeing that with 11 Labs and all of these kinds of things that allow you to leverage the power of large language models and data sets. IBM Watson has been touted for a long time, and IBM Watson essentially is AI.
IBM Watson, you mean for diagnostics?
IBM Watson is used for lots of different things. When you watch the US Open tennis, they talk about how all these statistics are being crunched by IBM Watson. But you look at the fact that you can think about it from a healthcare perspective. Now you have all of these journals that have been cataloged and they're in a repository and you want to find like something related to an illness, something related to the research that's been done. AI allows you to access that in seconds versus what would take an individual hours, if not days, even longer.
That's true. I have found though with like anything finance or medical related, or even those I've talked to in those fields with AI, the hallucinations that it's still coming up with are so interesting. They've gotten a lot better, but they're like the beginnings of a sci-fi novel just because it feels like it doesn't want to let you down. ChatGPT doesn't want to let you down. So you ask a question in a certain way, it's going to give you an answer.
100%. It's not human, right? So what AI lacks is humanity. And I think that if you solely rely on AI, that doesn't work. When you use AI to augment what you do and you use it as a tool, not as a cure all, it works. AI can help you thought start an article. AI can help you organize your thoughts and do things, but it doesn't replace the human brain.
That's true. Yeah, it's like a board member go and
Yeah.
ask. What do you think is could you give me an example? You don't have to name any company names. Could you give me an example of how you took a company that's working with you, one of your clients, and you really grew them to, I don't know, 2x or whatever marker you're using in a really out of the box creative way?
Sure. We've done this numerous times, but back in 2013, the state of New Jersey decided that they were going to legalize online casino and poker. And it was fundamentally illegal across the United States, but the state of New Jersey decided that they were going to pass regulations and legalize online casino games and online poker. We had a client named Party Poker. It's a brand, and they came to Fearless and asked us to help them figure out how they can go from zero to number one in the market when it launches. Now, they had previously been in the United States. But back in 2006, President Bush at the time signed into law the Port Security Act. And part of that Port Security Act, there was a little addendum attached to the back called the Unlawful Internet Gaming Enforcement Act. And what that act said was that any gaming business, it was going to be illegal to transfer funds from a US bank to an offshore gaming business. And that effectively shut down online gambling in the United States. They didn't make online gambling illegal. They made the transfer of funds illegal. So in 2013, when they made it legal again, Party Poker returned to us and asked us to help them. So in 2013, when New Jersey decided to make it legal and they passed the law, Party Poker returned and said, "Hey, would you help us go from basically a brand that hasn't been in the market since 2006 and bring us back and get us to number one?" So they had no business here. They had zero. And we made them the number one online gaming business in New Jersey, basically overnight with the campaign that we did. Now, we worked in tandem with their internal teams, and there were a lot of really smart people on their side that had been doing this for years all over the world. And what we did is we put together a really cohesive media strategy that helped them not only get into the hearts and minds of consumers in New Jersey, but we worked on their emotional side of things. What we wanted people to feel, we wanted them to feel secure. We wanted them to feel safe by playing online because to a lot of people, they didn't understand what it was like to gamble online because it wasn't legal. Now it was. And we were able to do that and they scaled. They were a very large business in New Jersey and they were making millions of dollars.
Would you say that a lot of your success also comes from focusing on retargeting and data? You're a very
So
analytical person. So how much of it is that versus the creativity versus the empathy and getting into people's minds? Like if you had to give a percentage ratio.
oh, data is king, right? So data tells the story. It doesn't matter what I think, right? It doesn't matter how I feel, but the data tells the story. If I think I have the greatest commercial that I've made, if the data says that nobody responded to it, then it's not the greatest commercial ever made. But if I create a commercial or I have some messaging or a tactic and the results are there, right? That's how you see it. So everything these days is data driven, right? It's no longer just sticking your finger in your mouth and where is the wind blowing? You have the data and it's about understanding all of the data points, every part of the funnel of customer acquisition. So whether it's a small business that's starting or trying to raise money or trying to sell a business, it's all about the data. People want to know. They want to know how many customers do you have? How do you grow that customer base? Right. And how long is that customer going to stay with you? What's their lifetime value? And how can you increase that lifetime value? And utilizing the things that I've learned throughout my career has helped me understand how to attack all parts of that funnel and then grow all parts of that funnel.
If I'm a company and I'm interested in working with you, are there certain or requirements that I have to work with you and how would I find you?
The requirements is that you have to be open to change and you have to be open to being adaptable and you have to be able to break down barriers. And that's the most important thing. If you're willing to do that and you're willing to have an open and honest conversation about your business, then we can work together. It's all about being honest about where you are and what you're doing and how you're doing it, because then we can get to the real meat and potatoes of what we can do. If you're hiding things or you don't want to talk about things, or you're not resistant to change, right? Then you're better off either doing it on your own or working with somebody else, because the way we work best is when there's a real honest conversation and we can really get to the heart of the matter about your business and your business problems. And how to reach us is pretty simple. You can go to our website, right? You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty open. I will be more than happy to have a conversation. One thing that I do request is that anyone who wants to reach out to me, don't just friend me, send me a message. Tell me why. Let's have a conversation, right? Let's get to talk. When we talk, then we can become friends.
Well, I'm really happy that you came on. You're a very super interesting person. And I hope that people find you if they feel like that you can help them. And it sounds like you'd be a really smart person to have on their team. So thanks so much for coming on today.